Chapter 1, Introduction to Assessment. Definition of terms. The terms test, measurement, assessment, and evaluation are often used interchangeably in the field of testing. Identifying the differences in their context will help test developers and users create more accurate experiments and use the results more effectively. Comparative matrix on the four most commonly used terms in testing. Testing. 1. A set of items or question measuring a sample behavior or tasks from a specific domain of knowledge or skill, designed to be presented to one or more examinees under specific conditions, with definite boundaries and limits. 2. Consists of questions, exercises, or other devices to measure the outcomes of learning. Measurement. 1. Establishes the characteristics of individuals or groups of individuals through the assignment of numerals according to rules that give these numerals quantitative meaning. 2. A process of obtaining a numerical description of the degree to which an individual possesses a particular characteristic. Assessment. 1. Any of the variety of procedures used to obtain information about student performance. 2. Systematic conscious process of monitoring various pieces of learning to evaluate student achievement and instruction effective. 3. Answers the questions how much of a given skill does a student possess before, during and after instruction and how much change has occurred. Evaluation. 1. Involves a broader process that includes assessing several components of a whole and making instruction session. 2. The process of delineating, obtaining and providing useful information for judging decision alternatives. 3. The process of summing up their results of measurements or tests and giving them some meaning based on valid judgments. When an instructor is teaching, he or she should bear in mind that the ultimate aim of any educational effort is to improve instruction in order to inspire students to outperform their previous results. Classroom assessment defined. Classroom assessment can be defined as the collection, interpretation, and use of information to help teachers make better decisions. Thus, assessment is more than testing and measurement. Macmillan, 1997. 4 essential components of implementing classroom assessment. There are 4 essential components of implementing classroom assessment. These are purpose, measurement, evaluation, and use. Regardless if assessment has already been done before, during, or after instruction, clarifying the specific purpose of gathering information is still needed. Why is the assessment being done? Possible reasons of doing assessment are 1. To monitor student learning, measure what students have and have not learned and grade them. 2. To provide feedback of students' performance. And 3. To motivate the students by giving them positive reinforcement. Measurement is a systematic process of obtaining a numerical description of the degree to which an individual possesses a particular characteristic. Also, measurement is the process by which attributes, traits, behavior, or characteristics are determined and differentiated. A variety of techniques such as tests, ratings, observations, and interviews can be used to measure a defined trait or learning target. After gathering information through varied techniques, value judgment on said information needs to be given. This process is called evaluation. Evaluation involves the interpretation of what has been gathered through measurement, in which value judgments are made regarding performance. The final stage of implementing assessment is the use of the evaluation. The use of test scores and other information is closely tied to the decisions one must make to provide effective instruction and to the needs of students and parents. Purposes and functions of assessment are for purposes of assessment according to Wyatt, 1988. These are: to inform the teacher about a student's progress, to inform the students about their progress, to inform others about the student's progress, parents and future teachers, and to provide information for the public. These purposes can be summed up into 3: assessment for learning, assessment of learning, and assessment as learning. Earl, 2005. In assessment for learning, teachers use the student's prior knowledge as a starting point of instruction. The results of assessment are communicated clearly and immediately to the students to determine effective ways to teach and learn. Assessment of learning or summative assessment is done after instruction. It is used to identify what students know and can do and the level of their proficiency. or competency. Its results reveal whether or not instruction have successfully achieved the desired curriculum. Outcome: the information from assessment of learning is usually expressed as grades and is made known to the students, parents, and other stakeholders for better decision-making. Assessment as learning is done. For teachers to understand and perform well their role of assessing for end of learning, it requires teachers to undergo training on how to assess learning and be equipped with the competencies needed in performing their work as assessors. To assess for end of learning, teachers should have the needed skills in assessment. This could be made possible through the different forms of capacity building. The purposes of assessment lead to development and improvement, and accountability and confidence. In this context of assessment and accountability, Eisner in 1993 listed 5 functions of assessment. Temperature-taking function describes the educational health of the country rather than individual students or systems. Gatekeeping function directs students along certain paths of learning based on the view that the school has a social selection function. Feedback to teachers function provides information to teachers about the quality of their work. Objectives achievement function determines whether the course objectives have been achieved. Appraisal of program function provides an indication of the quality of the program. Beyond the relationship of assessment and accountability, SSES-SMEN2 serves valuable functions for students in the classroom. It concentrates attention on specific aspects of a subject. It provides necessary feedback. It redirects attention to particular areas to increase mastery. It necessitates the consolidation of learning practice of skills. It facilitates the student's self-assessment of his/her progress. Importance of assessment. Assessment serves specific purposes. The results of assessment are generally used to 1. Provide essential guide for planning, implementing, and improving instructional programs and techniques. 2. Monitor student progress. 3. Promote learning by providing positive information, like knowledge of results, knowledge of tasks well done, good grades and praises. 4. Measure the outcomes of instruction. And 5. Provide the parents with information on how well their children are doing in school. Scope of assessment. Chief purpose of assessment is the improvement of the student. Specifically, it assesses the learning outcomes of instruction, which are cognitive behaviors, knowledge and information gained, intellectual abilities, affective behaviors, attitudes, interests, appreciation, and values, and psychomotor behaviors, perceptual and motor skills and abilities in performing tasks. Principles of assessment. Assessment is an integrated process for determining the nature and extent of student learning and development. This process will be most effective when the following principles are taken into consideration. Gronlund, 1995. 1. Specifying clearly what is to be assessed is prioritized in an assessment. The effectiveness of an assessment depends as much on a careful description of what needs to be assessed as it does on the technical qualities of the assessment procedure that was used. Thus, the specification of the characteristics to be measured should precede the selection or development of assessment procedures. 2. An assessment procedure should be selected because of its relevance to the characteristics or performance to be measured. Assessment procedures are frequently selected on the basis of their objectivity, accuracy, or convenience. These criteria are important, however. They are only secondary to the major question asked before the assessment, which is whether the chosen procedure is the most effective method of measuring the learning or development that needs to be assessed. 3. A comprehensive assessment of student achievement and development requires a variety of procedures. No single type of instrument or procedure can assess the vast array of learning and development outcomes emphasized in a school program. 4. Proper use of assessment procedures requires an awareness of their limitations for them to be used more effectively. No test or assessment is composed purely of questions or problems that might be presented in a comprehensive coverage of the knowledge, skills, and understanding relevant to the objectives of a course. On the other hand, limitations of assessment procedures do not negate the value of tests and other types of assessments. 5. Assessment is a means to an end, not an end in itself. The use of assessment procedures implies that some useful purpose is being served, and that the user is clearly aware of this purpose. Assessment is best viewed as a process of obtaining information on which to base educational decisions. Numerous principles for effective assessment have been suggested by the New South Wales NSW Board of Studies, 1996. NSW Department of School Education, 1996. Brady, 1995. Eisner, 1993. Broadfoot, 1991. And Griffin and Nix, 1991. The following is a selection of those principles considered by the authors to have the most value. 1. Assessment should be a continuous and an integral part of teaching and learning. Continuous assessment is necessary to provide regular feedback to students. This information can also be used to modify the purpose of teaching. 2. Assessment should be varied to give students multiple opportunities to demonstrate what they know. The strategies should be as diverse as the scope of outcomes, and provisions should be made to assess more than a solo performance. 3. Assessments should be valid. They should accurately assess what they are designed to assess. Problems of invalidity usually arise when assessment is based on imprecise statements of educational intent. 4. Assessment should engage the learner. An effective assessment involves a democratic relationship between the teacher and the student. It should enhance the student's abilities of being self-critical and taking responsibility for their own learning. 5. Assessment should be diagnostic. The strategies used to assess students should indicate not only the result but also the processes that resulted in an acceptable performance. Thus, the assessment should show the student's needs, strengths, and weaknesses. 6. Assessment should value teacher judgment. Teacher judgment based on well-defined outcomes and classroom experiences is a rich form of student assessment that should not be considered secondary to formal testing. 7. Assessments should be situated. The strategies used to assess students should be reflections of what they might encounter in the outside world. 8. Assessments should require students to display sensitivity to the wholes rather than to discrete elements. Methods of assessment should allow the students to see the larger picture rather than a series. 9. Assessments should have the same meaning for all teachers, parents, and students. Teachers need to compare their interpretation of student performance and the assessment. Information should be communicated in such a way that it is understood by all stakeholders. Reganet, Reyes, and Marquez 2004 listed the following principles for effective classroom assessment. 1. Assessment must be based on a previously accepted set of objectives. Assessment takes place only in relation to the objectives that have been previously set up. 2. Assessment should be a continuous, cumulative process and must be operative throughout the entire teaching and learning process. 3. Assessment must recognize that the total individual personality is involved in learning. 4. The assessment process should encourage and give opportunity to the student to become increasingly independent in self-appraisal and self-direction. 5. Assessment must be done cooperatively. 6. Assessment is positive in nature and promotes action. It includes planning for improvement and overcoming weaknesses. 7. Assessment is governed by true democratic principles. 8. Assessment should include all significant evidences from every possible source. 9. A comprehensive record of the evidences gathered in the process of assessment is necessary to assure an intelligent interpretation of the data. 10. Assessment should take into consideration the nature of the opportunities and limitations of the educational experiences provided by the school. Recent trends in classroom assessment. Recent trends in classroom assessment have emerged. Heavy objective testing at the end of an instruction is being replaced by alternative assessments that may be done during the teaching process. Alternative assessments include authentic assessment, performance-based assessment, portfolios, exhibitions, demonstrations, journals, and other forms of assessment that allow students to construct their original responses. Trends of classroom assessment. From sole emphasis, isolated skills, isolated facts, paper and pencil task to context wall-eyed tasks, a single correct answer, secret standards, secret criteria, individuals after instruction, little feedback, objective tests, standardized tests, external evaluation, single assessment, sporadic, conclusive. 2. Assessment of process integrated skills. Application of knowledge authentic task contextualized task several correctants were public standards, groups during instruction concept or feedback, performance-based tests, informal tests, students self-evaluation, multiple assessments, continual recursive,